Namaste and greetings. I, Shweta Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, New Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for day 6 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online national summer school program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course, and internship program. This program is organized by the IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, and the fellowship lead advisor and the expert legal hands-on sessions is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow, IMPRI. The distinguished experts includes Shri Chachra, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Advocate Dr. Vahida Nainer, Professor Mukul Asher, Professor Uday Shankar, Shri Udit Mishra, Dr. Nivedita P. Haran, Shri Bhartendra Singh Baswan, Dr. Punima Chauhan, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, Dr. Gladstone Xavier, Professor Aruna Roy, Advocate Audrey D. Mello, Dr. Kaustuv K. Bandyopadhyay, Advocate Mrunalini Deshmukh, Professor Sharmila Ghuge, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Advocate Flavia Agnes, Mr. Debaditya Sinha, Professor Swaran Singh, Advocate Lara Jasani, Professor Anil K. Gupta, Justice Ajit K. Singh, Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Dr. Amar Jasani, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Mr. Bilal Khan, Shri Rajiv Ranjan Singh, Shri Tikendra Singh Panwar, Shri Shailesh Gandhi, Dr. Simi Mehta, Advocate Abdul Hafiz Gandhi, Professor Amita Singh, Dr. Ajay Gudavarti, Shri Amit Dubey, Professor Sangamitra Acharya, Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy, Advocate Sanchita Ayan, Shri Surendranath Tripathi. And efforts into truly understanding the vital role and complex intricacies of legal and public policy frameworks. The course will enable the participants to comprehend the nuances and technicalities of legal and public policy paradigms and therefore acquire theoretical insights along with technical skills to conduct research.
I guess Shweta is having some connection issues.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Vibhuti ma'am, why don't you start with the chair's remarks and then
okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shweta, and also Dr. Arjun Singh, Simi Mehta, Shalu Nigam ji, Shweta Shankar, Ms. Vidhita, and Satyam Tripathi for putting this course together. And now we are in the second week and the second lecture. Welcome, Shri Bhartendra Singh Baswan ji and the esteemed participants. In this second week of an online national summer school program, we are going to I'm summarizing what all transpired so far. Shri Sandeep Chachra began with describing the legal perspective and his personal experiences. And also Dr. Shalu Nigam, she also shared the experience in the very first day. In this, we also had my presentation on the overarching concerns in public policy and law. In the second day, Dr. Vahida Nainer, she made us acclimatize with the international human rights instruments, its application, implication, impact, and relevance. In day 3, we had a discussion on law, economics, and public policy by Professor Mukul Asher, and he also made a very thought-provoking statements about the limits of the judiciary versus limits of the and what kind of judicial activism is acceptable and what can be detrimental to the national interest. In day 4, we had 2 presentations by Professor Uday Shankar, who spoke on policy initiatives and role of Indian judiciary, where also he acclimatized us with the 2 schools of thoughts, one which believes in separation of power and the executive, means judiciary and the executive, and with the other school which says that no, whenever the executive errs or has limitation judiciary as a role, and they see judicial activism very positively, and the role of social movement in sensitizing the masses and the judiciary about the required legal reforms. The second presentation by Shri Udit Mishra on law, public policy, and the media. He also said that media had made very important contribution in terms of bringing the truth out, but wherever like media also needs to have ethics, social accountability. He gave examples of drought, and he gave examples of privatization of public sector, and several examples of the during the pandemic. And he also suggested that trust model of running the media house is more important because it can counter the political interference. And he gave example of Guardian, BBC, and in India, the Tribune from Chandigarh. And then we have the question of the fifth day, where Dr. Shalu Nigam talked to us about the human rights movement, the efforts of various human rights organizations and the human rights movement. And Dr. Nivedita Haran, she focused on the 5 important assets of public policy process in terms of political and social cultural factors, data, authenticity of data being very important, governance issues, efficiency and non-corrupt governance, financial situation of the country, of the state, and the public sectors, and also efficiency of public services. And she gave example of Kerala, where she said that because of awareness, socioeconomic status of people, human development indicators, it becomes very easy for the public policies as well as governance structure to intervene even in the crisis period, such as tsunami, where the people had to be evacuated. And now today, on the 6th day, we have Shri Bhartendra Singh Baswan to speak on public policy drivers, a very, very important concern for conceptualization, formulation, implementation, evaluation, and modification of public policies whenever it is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Patel. Should I proceed?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Members of the meeting, the seminar, and of course, Professor Patel, Dr. Shalu Nigam, Shweta Shankar, and friends. Now, this is a longish session. And as you know, just as well as I do, that giving a lecture is a lot easier than listening to one. So what I do is I just flag 3 or 4 general issues. I'll try and open it up for discussion. If I need to elaborate anything, which I will do, I shall certainly, respond to that. This is a freewheeling session. I'm looking at all policy issues broadly, painting them with a very broad brush. And this is also a no-holds-barred session, so that no question, no matter how awkward, will be answered to the best of my ability and to the best of my knowledge. Now, public policy drivers basically is what creates public policy. How is public policy formed? I'll start by simply giving you the procedure. If the government takes a view that policy needs to be changed, we need innovations, they have a set process. The people responsible, the cabinet may take a decision, but the people who process the case are the line ministries or the ministries dealing with the subjects. So the minister, the secretary, and other officials gather together, they brainstorm among themselves. Then they invite suggestions from all the stakeholders, whether in academia, the state governments are a part of the process, they're consulted. Anyone else, the public, are requested to provide the inputs. Once these data is collected, then the ministry concerned, with the approval of the cabinet, prepares a white paper, which the opposition call a black paper. And once this is prepared, then it's processed in the ministry. It goes to a committee of secretaries. It goes to the cabinet. Once the cabinet clears it, if there's legislation, it goes to both houses of parliament. And then parliament studies this if there's a change in the law. Now, we tend to underestimate parliament. What we watch on TV It's people shouting at each other, people rushing into the well, occasionally throwing missiles. But that doesn't give you the clear picture. The serious business of Parliament is conducted in committees. And that is where there is a fairly detailed, often high caliber discussion where ruling party and opposition leaders work in harmony without, trying to put each other down. And I found the discussions extremely constructive. And then these committees scrutinize things. Now, this means that a change in policy is bound to take time unless the government issues an ordinance, and we can discuss the pros and cons of that. Now, as far as what drives public policy, the first driver, I believe, is ideology. I'll start with political ideology, that by the, say around 100 years ago, the lines were fairly well drawn between the right and the left. And Britain had its Labour Party now in position, and the Liberals were gradually pushed out from the center. It not completely pushed out in those days. That happened a lot later. And the Marxist experiment was done in Russia, and the Russian Revolution changed everything. It was largely industry-based. It was largely also, it was building up for a long time, the exploitation by the Tsarist regime, despite, giving the serfs some freedom, and the state of World War I. So then what happened was that it was basically the cities and Lenin and his colleagues who pushed the Russian Revolution. It didn't have an easy time, obviously. There was a civil war. The other countries, the White Russian, the civil war lasted well into the 1920s. And Lenin died in 1930. So the building of the Soviet Union was actually done by Stalin. And Stalin believed in centralized planning. He was a brutal dictator. And his first 5-year plan meant he wanted to build up his strength. He wanted to make the Soviet Union a world power. And he was also planning for war as early as 1927, which is a long way away. Now, as far as the capitalist movement is concerned, markets obviously were booming. And one of the main events in the last 100 years has been the Great Depression. The Great Depression followed on the heels of World War I, where the world map was withdrawn. And many policies are as a result of this. Because when the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire broke up, the British and the French grabbed most of the Ottoman Empire, a large part of it. So the entire Middle East was carved out by two bureaucrats, one British and one French, and उन्होंने पूरा कब्जा किया. Then the Austro-Hungarian Empire broke up. You had all these countries coming up, and yet there were problems which we can discuss if you so choose. When markets collapsed, people believed that the capitalist system was doomed, because taking you back to economics 101, when consumption falls, when investment falls, there has to be government intervention or sarkari kharcha. And that's really what happened. What you call the Keynesian vision, or FDR's New Deal in the US, was that government had to invest. So governments did invest, but we tend to underestimate the main Keynesian intervention, which is World War II. War is a terrible thing. It can also be a wonderful thing for certain economies. It ends unemployment. It improves production and productivity. It creates a superordinate goal where everyone goes along with the government. And therefore, while it is an evil, it has certain beneficial economic benefits. Of course, ideally, the best way to profit from a war is to enter after most of the protagonists have exhausted themselves and then come in as a game changer. The Americans came in at the right time in World War I, they reaped the benefits, and then America became a global power. In World War II, it was somewhat different, because in World War I, as you know, the Treaty of Versailles was a little unfair. After World War II, they decided not to make the mistakes that their precursors had done. So they focused on the development of the defeated powers, and Japan and Germany, as you know, became great powers once again. So this became a win-win situation. After the Korean War, South Korea grew, and they had the opportunities. They were given most favored nation treatment. So the lesson of one is that ideology is, it has no ready answers, because neither capitalism as a system works because the market has certain structural inefficiencies. The market is a cruel judge, but a fair judge. It rewards the efficient, it punishes the inefficient. Governments very often reward the inefficient and punish the efficient. So as a system, it is more effective. Now, the question then is, what about the leftist vision or the Marxist vision? Now, we've had experience has shown us more or less that communist government can thrive only if it is supported by a brutal dictatorship. We need to remember that both Stalin and Mao killed millions of their citizens. They ended up probably killing as many citizens as Hitler did. So what happens is that it then works. A socialist government, pure socialism, even of the Scandinavian variety, has certain structural inefficiencies. You can neither reward nor penalize. There's no incentive. And therefore, people say that, that capitalism is the only answer, but it's not. Today, we are a lot wiser. We know that these ideologies provide a framework, but if you want to fine-tune your national policies, you require inputs, Keynesian inputs, even Marxian inputs, and you require monetarist inputs in order to fine-tune your policies. Gone are the days when it becomes an either-or situation. And ideologies, whether religious, ecological, political, they provide a framework, but if you strongly believe in an ideology, you stop thinking. And therefore, blind belief in any ideology, I believe, is giving up a part of your intelligence. You need to calibrate policies carefully. And what we watch on TV with these political slanging matches between the pro-Modi and the anti-Modi groups is basically like an akhada of WWF. It's entertainment, but not particularly enlightening, because they spend far too much time spewing venom on each other. So the next great event after the Great Depression and redrawing the map of Europe was obviously the World War II, which ended the recession completely. And then after the war, the building began, and we had the Cold War. We also had the end of colonialism, because colonialism was no longer a viable situation. The colonial powers had exploited the developing world as it was for a number of years. There's a reason for that. People talk about how great India was, how great China was, how great the Islamic world was, which was the greatest
I think connection issues. I will check. with the screen. Okay.
Sorry, I'm back. My internet connection was cut for a short while. Now, the ideological lines were drawn, and nowhere greater than in the Cold War. The Cold War was won by the West because of information. The fact was that the Soviet Union and its satellites had access to Western information. The world changed. And one of the greatest game changers was Gorbachev, who put an end to the Soviet Union. That led to a unipolar world, and we have the rise of China. We've had the end of colonialism. We've had the gradual rise of India. The Indian story, to sum up very briefly, we had limited independent India, that is. We had limited infrastructure. So the first 3 5-year plans helped us with that infrastructure. It had a leftist orientation. At that time, it was probably unavoidable. The government had to invest. They did. And then later, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, her ideological leanings were to the left, and she was fighting for her political survival. So she increased her control of the government. This led to the license permit Raj. The license permit Raj was a centralized system of corruption. When I joined the ministry, in the industry ministry in 1979, I was wearing a shiny suit, and I came to Udyog Bhavan. And the lift wala looked at me, उन्होंने सलाम किया मुझे, तो मैंने भी सलाम किया. फिर उन्होंने झुक के सलाम किया, तो मैंने भी झुक के सलाम किया. सोचा कि ये लोग बहुत शरीफ हैं, और उन्होंने सोचा कि इस आदमी से कुछ मिलने वाले नहीं है. Money making was the name of the game. Documents were all photocopied. Liaison officers used to come. And India's greatest socialist at that time was Ghanshyam Das Birla, because a lot of MPs and officials were supportive. He prevented competition. People were punished for producing more. And the result was that the money flowed right to the very top. And we became an inefficient economy. We were producing substandard goods at a high price for a captive audience. And ultimately, bankrupt policies lead to bankrupt governments. And in 1991, because we became bankrupt, we reformed. And since then, our growth has been steady and gradual. You look at our GDP growth rates, and certainly the old rates of growth were now changed. And it's been a long and steady march. Game changers, of course, are there. And we had, apart from removing licensing control, barriers to entry were removed. Some barriers to exit were removed. And the country grew. It's still growing now. As regards the role of the coalitions of NDA 1, UPA 1 and 2, NDA 2, 3, we can discuss this as we go along. I've flagged some of the issues only. I don't want to give you an overdose, as it were. I'd like questions, I'd like issues to be raised by you, and I'd respond on each specific issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have Professor Vibhuti ma'am to share her remarks on the session.
In such a short time, sir, you have covered the broad canvas of the geopolitics, global geopolitics during the colonial times and in the post-war period, and how the Cold War period and from bipolar world we went for the unipolar world after collapse of USSR, and also the India's trajectory of first of its economic model, the license for arbitrage, and now where we are. So I think now we will be talking about what happened after the India adopting neoliberal economics and under the leadership of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and what kind of liberalization, privatization, and globalization policies, what has it done over the last 30 years? Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting.
Okay.
And
I think it's transformed the country. The process has been slow, and that was inevitable because we can't really gallop at this stage. It's been a steady growth. Our living standards have gone up. Our consumption has gone up. As a young IAS officer in the combined Madhya Pradesh, I could see poverty at real. And we in MP and Chhattisgarh, we believe that the folks in Delhi and most other parts of the country have never really seen abject poverty like we have seen in Chhattisgarh, in Jharkhand, in Western Orissa, parts of Northern Andhra. That is where people did not have enough to eat. In Chhattisgarh, if there was a drought, people there'd be no food grains, they would eat roots. And if you went to their house, what we found was rice and salt. Sabzi and dal were unknown. And this was the condition in the 60s. And of course, today, the situation has changed. It's all available. Electricity, there was no electricity for miles around. And when I went back many years later as a divisional commissioner, the complaints were ki saab, tumhara transformer bar band ho jate hain. So what has happened is that it's been a long journey, but we have certainly changed for the better. Some degree of credit should go to the governments. There has been corruption. There's been siphoning of funds. At times, it's been uncontrollable. But there is a forward movement of growth which is there. And this growth is probably picking up as we move to better times. The telecom revolution is something which I wanted to flag because this instrument has been the most important instrument of empowering the Indian people. And I'll also flag the issue of corruption over here because this was, how did this happen? There was a lot of inputs coming in globally that we need to move towards greater connectivity through the mobile phone. We need to decontrol. We need to privatize. And the first great, of course, Rajiv Gandhi did make a contribution. So did Sam Petroda. So did the unsung engineers of the telecom department. And so did Mr. Vittal, the secretary. But the greatest prime mover was Pandit Sukhram. He's famous for being corrupt. He's famous for going to jail. But he was a great reformer because he was impartial in his corruption. He virtually held an open session and said, "Bhai, tum kitna de sakte ho?" And when they paid, he gave rise to the highest bidders. By doing that, he facilitated progress. In one sense, you look at it, there may be a degree of moral ambiguity, but this is what happened. The other great reformer, I believe, was Mr. Raja. Now, his motives may have been to collect money for himself, his organization, one or two other people. But what he did was he kept the price of spectrum low. If you remember, most of you won't remember, but my faculty colleagues would, that there used to be an advertisement on cell phones by Nokia. So the phone rings in the barber's shop and the head barber picks it up, not his phone, not the phone of the customer, not the phone of the other people, but the mundu who brings chai. He has a phone. So it shows that anyone can own a cell phone. So credit must go to these people. They did have spells in jail and they probably deserved it. But the fact was that this triggered the growth of one particular sector. Because with the telecom sector, we've had a multiplier effect. Internet connectivity came up now, and that has made a world of difference. And as we go further, and now following yesterday's discussions in Washington, D.C., we expect a quantum leap in quantum computing, as it were, and 5G will come, certainly. And therefore, what's happening is that we see a slightly faster growth rate, which may be sustainable. In UPA 1, our growth rates were quite good, but there were problems regarding implementation. You had a coalition of 8 or 9 people. And like a three-legged race in school, when you tie your legs together and run, you can't run fast. In UPA 1, you had 10 people running and 2 were running in the opposite direction. So therefore, you tend to slow down a little bit. And that is the price of coalition politics. But at the same time, there is a certain momentum which is given. So the first driver, I would say, is obviously ideology and the absence of it. The second driver is corruption or rent seeking. Now, corruption exists everywhere. If I am elected as an MP or an MLA, my aim is to get re-elected. And therefore, I might need funds. Now, the definition sometimes of a corrupt politician is one. An honest politician is one who collects money for the party and doesn't keep it for himself, as it were. So different countries have different models. And UPA 2 was reviled because they said that, everyone is making money, because the system was that if you are in charge of a ministry, you are expected, you can be corrupt and collect money for your party. But if the amount is very high, then the coordinating agency has to get its share. This is one reason why the 2G scandal broke. So they basically battled over the spoils. Then with the coming of NDA 2, and people say that, look, पहले बहुत भ्रष्टाचार था, अब बंद हो गया. भ्रष्टाचार बंद नहीं होता. Nor does funding of party elections कोई दूर में धुला हुआ नहीं है. But the thing is that with the present dispensation, this is what people call the Gujarat model, where the party studies the companies or the likely donors, and they check the propensity to pay or to contribute. They hire financial whiz kids and IT experts to scrutinize these companies, get an idea about what is their earning both in black and white. And then they say that we feel that you have the ability to pay. We look forward to your contribution, and they pay. But they say, please remember 2 things. Our policies are pro-industry. Do not ask us, do not tell us what to do. And do not interfere in the administration. So the pattern has changed. In the classroom, I'm often asked, do Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani own the government of India? I said, no, the government owns them. The government owns them. They also own the Tatas in a sense. They own L&T. They would support Vedanta. They would support Aditya Birla. They would support the IT giants, because the present government's model is, I believe, largely based on the models adopted by Japan in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where the Ministry of Trade and Industry used to tell their people that, look, Mitsubishi, don't bid for this project, let Hitachi bid. And that way they had a national approach. Similar the case with the Korean governments, dictators like Singh and particularly Park Chung-hee created the Chaebol, and they went in. So this push of state capitalism, state-guided capitalism, is what actually gave a boost to these countries. But these countries also have what we call the Mandarin work ethic. And you have the Protestant work ethic, as it were, in parts of Europe. The Indian work ethic has been derided, saying that we are not in the same category. But if you provide opportunities for investment, for growth, we are as good or as bad as anyone else, in many ways slightly better. So corruption was the second. The third is linked with that, which is what we in India call vote bank politics and populism, or the Americans call it battle politics. So I would like to please everyone. And this means that I offer freebies, which are not sustainable. Subsidies are bad. They're bad for the person who gives them, they're bad for the person who receives, because we become nikammas. Earlier, villagers would contribute for their improvements for digging wells. There was people's participation. सरकार ने कहा कि आप सब मुफ्त में ले लीजिए, जो मुफ्तखोरी होता है वो काम नहीं कर सकता. And therefore many of us but we became nikammas. If you depend on the sarkar, you become a nikamma, and that sarkar also can't deliver. There has to be a certain amount of contribution, so that you not only suppose the government gives everyone everything. In that case, there will be more corruption. If a person pays even 10%, then he would come and say, कि collector साहब आपने ये किया है, मैंने भी हिस्सा दिया, आप हमें जवाब दे दो. So accountability of civil servants becomes important, and the citizens have to have a sense of ownership, and this ownership should be in the form of a partnership with the government and not a Mai Baap Sarkar. So gradually these things are changing, our mindsets are changing, and there's a cause for optimism. I'll feed more, I'll face more questions now, I'll raise more issues as time goes along.
There is a question from Harsha Kawatra. Can you speak? Can you unmute and speak, Harsha ji?
Harsha, you can unmute and read the questions. Yes, Harsha, go ahead. No problem. I can read the question.
Yeah.
Sir, it is known that the government did not really focus on education in its initial 5-year plans. What is the main reason of keeping this field secondary?
Sorry, just a second. Yes. Can I have that question again?
I will, yeah. Sir, it is known that the government did not really focus on education in its initial 5-year plans.
Yes.
What is the main reason of keeping this field secondary, and how would things have fared if it was given a priority? It is also very...
Yes. Okay. Let me first put the record straight. In the first 3 5-year plans, as a proportion of the budget, there was investment in education. But gradually, government's policies changed, and education was neglected. So was health. So was welfare. As the secretary of 3 welfare ministries, the Ministry of Welfare and the Ministry of HRD, Education, School and Colleges, and Tribal Affairs, I discussed this with members of parliament, my committee members. I said, look, health, education, welfare, these are important things. Why don't you support us and give us more money in the budget? And their answer was quite simple. जैसे कि साहब सीधी सी बात है, हमारा टाइम फ्रेम 5 साल का हमें री-इलेक्ट होना है. वोट किस चीज से मिलता है? रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान, बिजली, सड़क, पानी, इससे हमें वोट मिलता है. Health, education, welfare, these are low visibility, long-term investments. They don't get us votes. And therefore, these sectors did not have a political constituency. So crowding out takes place, and education was grossly neglected, unlike our neighbors in Southeast Asia, who improved their health and education parameters, which enabled them to leave us far behind. We patronized these countries, but they began laughing at us because India was the sick man of Asia because of the license permit Raj, because of inefficient policies. And things have changed since then. Some credit has to be given to both the UPA and the NDA governments for the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the midday meal scheme, gradually extending this to secondary education, at least up to class 10. So the education gap has been is being filled to a degree. But having said that, look, let's have in fact, let's take a definition of what is a public good and what is a merit good. Now, a public good is one where the government has to invest. So therefore, the private sector will not come in there because they don't get a return on their investment. Where the private sector is ready, willing, and able to participate, that becomes a merit good. Is education a public good or a merit good? There's been a debate about this, but the answer is both, depending on the sector of education we are looking at. If you are looking at rural education, elementary education, and to a degree even urban areas, then it becomes a public good. The private sector can enter and create competition, but the state cannot abdicate its responsibility where the private sector is not willing to come in. That is for elementary education. Secondary education, the position is different. And if the children have a choice, then we find that in big cities, people, even Group D employees and those very poor, would rather go to a private school than a Sarkari school. They vote with their feet. In other areas, they don't. So to that extent, the state has a role. If we look at higher education, we tend to put this in two parts. If there's a market demand for technical education, medical colleges, engineering colleges, nursing colleges, law colleges, commerce colleges, there is a demand. And therefore, the government needn't be that active. They have done their bit. They've played a pioneering role in setting up the IITs, the NITs, the IIMs. That was necessary. But now, it is to a large extent market-driven. And, that's an issue which we can discuss very briefly. But non-technical higher education, the art subject, the social sciences, these do not attract that investment, and therefore the state does need to supplement their efforts. Universities like Ashoka, like Shivnada, just to name a few, they are focusing on the art subject, but it's not a money spinner. Coming to technical education, then the question comes as to who's going to bear the cost. The government of Karnataka have been pioneers in this regard. Manipal is a pioneering institution. So what happens is that if I'm a private sector provider, I do not invest out of love and affection for the people of India. I'm investing because I want a return on my... I'm a motivated chap. I'm a philanthropist also, but I'd like to make money. So what I do is I charge a fee. The fees, even Manipal and even, Ma Antmai, her institution, the fee for getting admission was one time about 40 lakhs. So you have to pay cash down. What you pay is what you get. If I'm going to Manipal, I would certainly pay a capitation fee of about, in those days it was about 14, 15 lakhs. If I go to the Patel's in Karad, I would pay about 10 lakhs. And if I were to go to the BS Baswan engineering, I wouldn't pay more than 10,000 rupees. So the fact is, it's the market which actually determines there is a market. And what the state has done is they've created they've tried to expand their government institution. But the problem is one of faculty. Society does not respect its teachers. The IIM students, the IIT students know that they will earn much more than their professors. And as a society, earlier we talk about the Guru Shisha Parampara. It was a horrible parampara because it taught us not to think very often. But the fact is that you expect your teachers to teach you, and they do a great job, but you're not going to attract people in this profession unless you take a critical look at the wage structure. For men, it's okay because, a chap can go and they don't rush into the teaching profession. If they say, did you go into teaching? You say, yes. He said, kya, aapko naukri kahin nahi mila? For women, it's different because we Indians do follow double standards. We are happy if our daughters teach. It's a perfectly respectable profession. Going into the IAS is a quote-unquote respectable profession. But these old social mores are changing now. And today's girls are not going to take the old patronizing attitude for granted, as it has happened in the past. But this is our historical legacy. So the thing is that the short answer to your question is, we did neglect education. We are now focusing, the government are now focusing on public goods to fill in the gaps, but the private sector has a critical role to play. That's certainly there.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So next question is going to IR. Sanketji, you want to unmute and ask yourself?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
I can see you, but I can hear you. Yeah, okay. Sanket.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Sir, somewhere in your talk, you talked about Cold War and now like how it influenced the global politics. So like at that time, India was caught up between the, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, and India has to, made its stance very clear. So I just want to know, like, what was India's role as India's position as a, global swing state, and how does that kind of a thing work in the global politics?
To become a swing state, you have to be a powerful country. Otherwise, you can't swing anything either way. Now, in India, there was perhaps a need to be non-aligned because we had our own insecurities. We were not a major power. We were an emerging nation, important nation nonetheless. So we wanted to steer a middle path between the West and the communist world. Given our own historical background, the fact was that Prime Minister Nehru was a leftist by preference. And when he went to the Soviet Union in 1955, to 55, he swung more to the left. But it was a tightrope we had to walk. As a result of that, the Americans weren't particularly happy with India. And they needed Pakistan, and Pakistan, as you know, was a member of CETO and CENTO, and very much an American ally. And it was the Soviet Union which actually applied its veto whenever the Kashmir issue was raised. So to that extent, we did need to walk that kind of a tightrope. We're still walking a tightrope now. Our policy remains very carefully nuanced. We are not anti-Soviet. We maintain friendship with them. We are much closer to the US, and there are valid reasons for this. There are also business relationships. And with the Chinese, because the Chinese were basically hegemonistic in their approach. And by doing that, I believe they've harmed their own interests. And they've created an enemy out of India, which can become an implacable one. And therefore, the US finds it useful to support us and to build us up as a counterweight against China.
Thank you, sir. So one more thing, regarding this particular answer that you gave. So since we have seen since 2014, India's foreign policy has been mostly inclined towards America or the NATO for that per se. So what is the strategy when India is focusing more towards America's in favor and is neglecting Russia's take, because initially it was Russia which helped India getting its economy boosted through various means. So what could be the strategy here?
You see, we are gradually moving right in many ways for 2 or 3 reasons. One reason is our own sense of insecurity, the China factor. This is one. Secondly, it makes more economic sense for us. It made economic sense. It still makes economic sense to move a little more to the right as far as our macroeconomic policies are concerned. It is our self-interest which has pushed us a little more to the right, and this is understandable because it will help us with our economic growth. We need economic partnerships. We are a rapidly growing economy, and Russia has not been a great economy otherwise. So there's a valid reason for this. And but we are walking a tightrope still in many ways. We're keeping lines of communication open with everyone, including Pakistan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We move on to our next question by Animesh ji. Animesh ji, you can unmute and ask. Yes.
Sir, are there alternative approaches to addressing the needs of specific voter groups without resorting to freebies and vote bank politics? Because
sure.
I believe
there are. And the Indian voter, I believe, is getting smarter with each election. We should never make the mistake of underestimating our voters. So they're smart enough, and they're looking at their interest, which is fine. So the answer is better delivery systems, ending corruption, their technological interventions. And this is where the digital revolution has made a world of difference. So what happens is that the harassment of villagers at the hands of the grassroots level government officials, the tyranny of their tyranny, as it were, has been reduced somewhat. Access has been provided to more people. If you get your support from the government online, you don't have to pay bribes like you normally did. And therefore, the people are happy without freebies, with better delivery systems. They will have access to their legislators, and it has sensitized the politicians as well. So I would say the answer is yes, you don't have to resort to freebies. And freebies become all the more dangerous. The more freebies you give, you make the public nikammas and you increase corruption. So freebies, I believe, are short-sighted. This doesn't mean that at times of crisis, you do not provide freebies. Providing rations for people, I think, is certainly not really a freebie. Food for work is not a freebie because there's work being provided. So I think that, you can do with a lot of other subsidies. Providing TV sets free, well, maybe it gives them spin-off benefits and helps, sell your TVs and create more awareness. It's there, but I would say that the subsidies very often cater to the rich and not to the poor. And fertilizer subsidies, I believe, need to be reduced. And our fertilizer subsidy is also a little flawed because we subsidize something like urea, which alters our NPK balance. And therefore, when you keep urea free, for example, or almost very cheap, what happens is it's misused. In the old days, mithai walas and others used to adulterate their sweets by using blotting paper. But the price of blotting paper went up, so that adulteration stopped. But now the adulteration in milk is with urea. Urea is also cheap. You mix it with your milk and you poison the people. So, too much of subsidies is not always a good thing.
So one more thing, like, what are your views on education being given as a freebie?
Given as a freebie?
Yeah, like...
Yes, I talked about this when I talked about a public good. I believe that elementary education should be free and compulsory. People should have a choice. The citizens should certainly be provided free education up to, I would say, at least class 8. But now this has been extended to class 10. So that facility already exists, but your parents may not want to send you because they would like you to get a good education. And what you pay for very often is what you get. But certainly, yes, this has to be done. It's being done, to be fair to both coalition governments. They have worked hard in this regard. It's a different matter that teachers are not to be found. In many of the Hindi-speaking states, except for Himachal Pradesh, teachers just did not turn up in the villages. They used to appoint substitutes, pay them a small salary, and they would live in the towns, and they would come to collect their salaries. And this was then because they had political pressure, so you couldn't make them attend school. And it is worse with the case of doctors, because doctors posted to rural areas used to apply political pressure and get attached to city hospitals. And the result was that it was impossible for us working in tribal areas. We couldn't provide basic health care. So what we did was we simply created mobile vans and would go to the villages on market day and provide services. And the doctors are not worried about it. I had a health minister in erstwhile Madhya Pradesh. As a divisional commissioner, I complained to him. He said, "Sir, मैं doctors को भेज दूंगा." About 5 months later, he said, "साहब मैंने हाथ ऊपर कर दिया. ये doctor के पास pressure होता है. मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता हूँ." And therefore, they followed a policy of providing incentives for young doctors that you'll only be confirmed if you spend certain amount of time in rural areas. But then you can't threaten doctors, because if you say नौकरी चले जाएंगे, जाने दीजिए, कोई बात नहीं, मैं private करूंगा, फिर कमाई ज्यादा होगा. So what happens is there's a limit to what the state can do. You have to think of, jugadu things in order to fill up the health gap.
Thank you, sir. Participants, I invite you to ask more questions, or you can also type in the Q&A box. So I had this one question that China, within the last 3-4 decades, have done so much exponential economic growth and also employment. How do you see when we compare India with China? Because corruption and others are also the policy of the current president.
Sure.
How do you see we can overcome this? And also with respect to Southeast Asia and also West Asia.
No, you see, I'll just touch upon Southeast Asia. They're focused on the social sector. They had positive policies. The Thai government had these policies. Vietnam, after the war, had a more open mind and less rigid. Indonesia, under Suharto, believed that corruption oils the wheels of progress, and they liberalized. They also invested in education. And even under Mahathir Mohamad, Malaysia did extremely well. They had an excellent bureaucracy, and they did well. But coming to China, look, we know that by 1979, China was in a complete mess. The damage done by the Great Leap Forward and by the Cultural Revolution had virtually made that country, in a sense, worse than us, even though they were a powerful military. But the man basically who changed this was Deng Xiaoping. What did Deng Xiaoping did was, he abolished communism on the land. Suppose you're a Chinese farmer and you would give about, say, 85-90% of your produce to the government. So the government says, now you keep 80%, give us 20%. The result was, within 3 years, Chinese agriculture production doubled. They include, tubers in their figures, but they went up to virtually 400 million tons. And this spurred, as we know, that industrial revolutions are very often triggered by agricultural revolution, as happened in Europe and in North America. So this applied here as well. And Mao Zedong's, backroom garden furnaces and stuff like that was romantic nonsense. It didn't work. But then state-led capitalism did create a lot of progress. And this helped China grow very rapidly and acquire, it has now acquired superpower status, because there was state capitalism. People were encouraged to invest. They opened up their economy. They participated in the global economy. They took full advantage of multilateral institutions, and they grew very rapidly. Then, as awareness increased, the question of individual liberties came in, because when Gorbachev, loosen the state's hold in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union broke up. He was responsible for both glasnost, which is political freedom, and perestroika, economic freedom. The Chinese regard the central Gorbachevian era as having, they say we should have, as it were, we should have perestroika, but we should not have glasnost. There should be no political freedom. Things came to a head in China when in Tiananmen Square, the students protested. And then Deng Xiaoping gave the green signal, and the Chinese authorities didn't know what to do. So they killed almost everyone. And it was a massacre. After the massacre, the Chinese sent a delegation to India, and they asked us virtually, how do you, disperse a mob without killing everyone? So we said, ये तो रोज का काम है. हम लोग लाठी चलाते हैं, tear gas चलते, मैंने भी चलाया. So it's a part of, you have these safety measures. But what happened then was that democracy was crushed in China. And Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, they were more liberal. But the fact is that Xi Jinping believes that he is the incarnation, not just of Mao, but the incarnation of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty, who created a large China, the wisdom of Kangxi, the Manchu emperor or Qin emperor, who created a large China, which incidentally includes Ladakh. So, it's a long story. But the fact is that China's success has been cynical state-driven capitalism. And at the same time, if the capitalists go out of control, as was the case with Jack Ma, they're given a kick in their pants and they're told to fall in line. So basically, it is state-led capitalism, and they've been put in their place. But the growth rates are there. They are competitive as an economy, and they have little regard for many multilateral institutions. They violate the WTO norms, but then everyone violates it. The European Union are big culprits. The Americans violate it. India violates it. So that's it.
Right, thank you. And so how do you see this phenomena? Because often Chinese see that the great humiliation by the West in the last century. So this is one factor which unites them. In India also, we have the politics of love and hate. How do you see this folding in our...
You see, there are two different issues. If you take the Chinese one, for example, China, as you know, escaped the problems of colonialism as such for a very long time. China was a great power, and but the early Manchus and Kangxi and his two immediate descendants, they had built up China as a very strong country till around the I would say the 17th century, 18th century, till the early 18th century. Now, what happened then was we had the Industrial Revolution. The West came forward. The Silk Road was closed, and Western sea power made the colonial countries the kings of the world, as it were. And then the Chinese actually, they were in decline. In the 19th century was the low water mark of China, because the Europeans made an entry. Then we had the Opium War. The British, it was a totally unjustified war. They dictated terms. You had the first Opium War, the second Opium War. The Chinese rulers were like puppets. They were pushed around. Then you had the next major problem they had was the Sino-Japanese War of 1895. And the Treaty of Shimonoseki basically they surrendered Korea. They were totally subdued by the Japanese, which is the rising Asian power. And then the Western powers came in the Boxer Revolution, and they all occupied parts of China. The British controlled Canton, Guangzhou, that's Shanghai. The French controlled their territories. The Germans controlled the Shandong Peninsula. Tsingtao was a German port. So they virtually dictated terms to China. And then the Western powers came in, they marched to Beijing, and the emperor became a puppet. So there was humiliation. And after that, even the time of the Dowager Empress, they were just thriving. But then you had the revolution of 1912, where the Kuomintang under Sun Yat-sen virtually replaced the Dowager Empress and her young grandson, who was the last, emperor of China. So this was what happened. As far as India is concerned, you talk about love and hate, and let's talk about the present, problem between the BJP, the Hindutva group on one hand, and the others. What happens is that religion is a substitute for thinking, I believe, very often. And it's like what Goldrich called the willing suspension of disbelief, because you believe that what you're saying is true. If you look at faith, the moment you have faith, you surrender to the Lord, so you stop thinking. And if you look at Indian history, we have a big problem, because we are very unfortunate in that if you look at the early Bronze Age civilizations, what did we have? And I'm talking about the period 3500 BC, going down to about 1200 BC. Now, in this period, what do we know? What we know is that Sumer and later Akkad in Mesopotamia were the first civilizations, along with the Old Kingdom in Egypt, at the time of Zoser, of the Saqqara pyramids, and our early Indus Valley civilization. India, in this regard, was ahead of China, because the early Bronze Age civilization was the mythical Ria dynasty, which tamed the Yangtze Kiang the Huanghe or the Yellow River. But we don't have enough evidence about the Ria dynasty. So that remains covered in myth. In our case, we have clear evidence about the Indus Valley civilization. It was there, it was highly advanced. What we know is that the Indus Valley civilization ended abruptly in 1800 BC. There were a number of reasons for that. The first reason was a massive earthquake, which diverted the Saraswati River, which was a perennial river. I believe the river Tons, which is the westernmost river of the Gangetic Basin, which rises in the Chitkul Glacier, was the old Saraswati. Recently, I went to the bed of the Saraswati looking at the latest Indus Valley site of Rakhigarhi, which is about 1 kilometer away from the Saraswati bed. So satellite imagery and low-flying aircraft have mapped out the entire settlements of the Saraswati River, the erstwhile Saraswati River. Indus dried up because there was drought. Now, there is a huge gap. India does not know its history. Between 1800 BC to around the 6th century BC, there are no records. There are only stories. These could cover the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These would cover the Vedas, which came to us, the Upanishads, the Puranas, Smriti, Shruti. All of these great documents are medical treatises, are products of a very rich oral tradition. Now, this oral tradition was never reduced to writing until around the time of Christ. Sanskrit, as we know, is one of the Proto-Indo-European languages. It was a part of the lingua franca of the Proto-Indo-Europeans who lived right between Anatolia and the steppes. And that gradually these people came to different parts of Eurasia. And the so-called Aryan invasion theory has been debunked, but waves of people came in. When waves of people came in, and the Zend-Avesta and the Rigved are mirror twins. The Rigved was probably, you talked about Sapta Sindhu, there could have been 9 rivers, because we have to include the Kabul River and the Helmand River. Because the Vedic peoples, and this is Rajesh Kocher's book, which talks about the Vedic peoples, probably came from the Iran-Afghan region. They settled over here because east of the Jamuna was a dense forest. There were only Neolithic people living there. So our IVC, or Indus Valley civilization, only extends to the boundary of the Yamuna. There's evidence for this. So this gap had to be filled in. And this gap was filled in by faith. In the Western world, the Bronze Age civilizations corresponding to Ramayana and Mahabharata were the Iliad and the Odyssey. And we have now clear evidence to show that Troy was destroyed many times, but Homer's Troy was destroyed around 1200 BC, which is what they call Troy 7 today. So faith has replaced fact. And this and belief is, so therefore, this belief is there. Now, any belief, and with, with a revival of, because we had different periods of Hindu revivalism. You had the Valmiki Ramayana, which is a remarkable document, which is basically that in the Bronze Age, they describe people as they are. And Ram is a human being. Ravan is also a human being, bit of a beefcoof because he did this, but otherwise he was there. Whereas in the Tulsi Ramayana, as it's a reformist document, it becomes too ideological and Adarsh Purush. And similarly with Manu, with the reformers, because Hinduism was under siege, because India was largely a Buddhist country. And of course, a remarkable person like Shankaracharya changed the narrative. But the fact was that, it was, they had, the revival movement was there. So, and then when when Islam took over and became the, the reference group, there was conversion. And any ruler, the Islamic rulers, you can't see things in black and white. They had their plus points, they had their minus points maybe more. Hindus were suppressed for many years, it's true. And therefore, this feeling of anger continues, like Islamic anger also, which started probably, right from the time that the Abbasid Caliphate collapsed, was exacerbated by the collapse of the Al-Andalus civilization, and ultimately by the Ottomans. So this anger, it's not going to be a predominant narrative. Is Narendra Modi going to divide the country? Will there be communal riots? No. What happened in 2002 was an aberration. It was governance failure when Muslims were killed, and the government did nothing about it, same as Rajiv Gandhi did nothing when Mrs. Gandhi was murdered and the Sikhs were killed. But there are correctives in this system. And, this divisive politics now is no longer sustainable. I believe that the NDA government realizes this. You look at the UP Panchayat elections now, where a large number of Muslim candidates have been put up. This country can only be ruled through an inclusive polity. And if the ruling dispensation neglect this, they would pay the price in the electorate, before the electorate. But I believe that I don't see too much of an increase in supporting Hindutva and the Gau Rakshaks. Today, you read the newspapers, you find a number of Gau Rakshaks are where they should be, behind bars.
Right, thank you. We have another question by Shweta. Shweta, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So carrying from the earlier asked questions regarding the healthcare, public healthcare in India, my question is based on, like nowadays, state governments especially have developed comprehensive healthcare strategies, right? So now the very objective of these strategies is to improve public health, especially taking in consideration of the vulnerable sections of our country. So my very basic question would be, will the higher allocation in terms of resource allocation in public healthcare would improve the public health status in India, and also would it also reduce the risk of healthcare expenditure? I mean, my question is in short-term basis. It's not long-term. I'm just thinking in short-term, how would it improve the status of our public healthcare?
See, COVID was a major learning process for us because we realized how inadequate our system was. And it continues to be inadequate in many parts of the country. In Kerala, it's not. Tamil Nadu is not. Quite a few states have got their act together. Himachal also are getting their act together. Theirs has been a fairly well-administered state. But in some of the other states, the fact is that we don't have doctors. So now telemedicine has also helped. Delivery, Jan Swasthya Yojana, these have made a difference. But is it sufficient? Probably not. Because like all governments, this government is cash-strapped. The demand for health has improved because public governments are not active, they are reactive very often. And in this case, of course, the present government is pretty active, but reaction means that unless more pressure is applied for health services on the part of the public, the reaction is slow. The funds may not be adequate for Jan Swasthya Yojana. To be fair to the government, initiatives like Swachh Bharat, for example, and putting an end to open defecation, a lot of work has been done there in terms of trying to deal with communicable diseases. A fair amount of work has been done. We have eliminated virtually everything now. And malaria, the battle continues. But, and dengue, of course, a lot of other things do remain. So there's an unfinished agenda. Not enough, I believe, is being done now because the sector is not getting its full, attention. Even though, because post-COVID, we tend to be complacent. So I would say there will be shortfalls here, but health insurance is one. The Jan Ausdale in the cities, stuff like that. These are improvements. Jan Swasthya Yojana itself is a major incentive. So efforts are being made.
Right. My follow-up question on the same part is that does more public healthcare expenditure produce an equitable result in healthcare market, in the healthcare market of status of India?
It should, but not in the sense that because ultimately your center, not just the district hospital, but the primary health centers and the sub-health centers. Even today, many of them in the Hindi heartland are not being attended to by their doctors. So these shortfalls remain. The situation is better than it was in the 80s and the 90s and on the turn of the century, but it's still inadequate. So a lot depends on the will of the state government. Tamil Nadu has done very well. Particularly, even Andhra has done quite a bit. So a lot of the other states have. Himachal has been good generally. Even in Jammu and Kashmir, things are a lot better. And Maharashtra has improved. Gujarat also, which again was neglected earlier.
Right. I have one similar follow-up question on the aspect of, a lot of Indians, there is also media reporting of it from quite some time, that a lot of Indians, those who are well-to-do, are leaving India on the aspect of ease of living, also because of investment and business opportunities.
Yeah.
So people in metros, let's say Delhi, posh areas, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, everywhere going to US or other destination, it keeps on changing. How do you see this? But India also has a lot of economic opportunities now.
Sure, it does. But maybe I can help India better if I'm out of India. So even now, a lot of Indian businessmen who've gone to the US and to Europe, to Britain, for example. Now, what happened? And not all of them are like Vijay Mallya or, Nirav Modi. But the fact is that it suits them. But they're not doing business in the USA or in Britain, they're doing business in Dubai. So if I'm a high net worth Indian, I leave India, join the new Quit India movement, but I would move to Britain or to the US, but I would open shop in Dubai because the taxes are low. So people will also rush where the taxes are low. And of course, Dubai is not considered safe because ever since, India sent back the crown princess to her father, the Crown Prince of UAE, the Prince of Dubai, then we've been able to extradite not just terrorists, but economic offenders have been packed off to India. So maybe if I were a crooked businessman, I would hesitate to go to Dubai. But I would say that the figures are there before you. You're aware that a large number of HNIs have been leaving the shores of India since around 2015, I would say. Large numbers. It makes economic sense for them. But they come to India, they invest here. And starting with the old NRIs, the Hindujas also, they're very much a part of the Indian growth story. But they like to do it from a safe distance.
Right. So, sir, do you think that the tax reform, especially for GST and personal or corporate tax, is something Dr. Subramaniam Swamy has been raising it a lot in a very extreme fashion? What are your opinions for that?
Dr. Subramaniam Swamy is like Mr. Navjot Singh Sidhu. They are unguided missiles. And if you fire them, they will come back and hit you. So the thing is that as far as I would say that the present government's policies have been very good. Pro-industry, the corporate taxes have been reduced. The iniquities of the Income Tax Act have been reduced. Corruption in the Income Tax Department has come down. So in a sense that we have and full marks for you, GST was bound to be difficult. It's not easy. And there are teething troubles. But the best part about GST is the GST Council, because ultimately it has to become a partnership between the federal government and the state. The finance minister cannot dictate terms to the states. She tried to, but she had to, in a sense, adjust her strategy. So the states are equal partners and they both gain. So I would say that GST, it took its time. There were hiccups. Demonetization may not have been advisable, but they've recovered. And GST today, you look at the GST results, evasion has come down. It hasn't vanished, but it has come down. And the fact is that government's kitties, whether on the direct taxes front or the indirect taxes front, are growing. And both are important, because obviously people do say that indirect taxes and generally inflation also affects the poor. Direct taxes, progressive and regressive taxes is a common phrase used. But I would say that the taxation policy has been good. I support it.
Yes, sir. The revenue tax collection has almost doubled before the COVID.
Absolutely. And that goes into investment. And investment has its leaks, but the leaks are smaller.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we have next question by Vaishali. Vaishali, please be brief. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, Vaishali, is it? Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, so I have one question related to administrative aspect. So when a particular local body introduces a new scheme, particularly related to sanitation or solid waste, that involves innovative technology, why does it happen that after a particular period, it kind of is not able to sustain? We have the experts coming in, we have the capacity building, we have the interdepartmental engagement along with public awareness. So where is the gap that is lying in bridging this sustainable aspect of a particular scheme that they introduce?
What exactly do you mean by local government? Do you mean the state government or the local panchayats or municipalities or municipal corporations?
Right, sir. So municipality per se.
Okay. You see, the municipalities, if you look at the municipalities of the world, of India, the most powerful, of course, is the BMC in Bombay, which is also a source of party fund collection for the state government. Now, the thing is that this gives me a chance to flag the issues of local government in India. The local governments in India, in the world, let us take the world. In Europe, how did we get local government? It happened because of the European Trade Guild. It was trade which creates the cities, and they in turn, you had city mayors and all over Europe. And therefore, local government grew organically, as it were, from the bottom. In India, contrary to the popular narrative, we never really had local government. Panchayats were a very nebulous thing. We don't have enough empirical evidence to confirm their presence. In India, this issue was debated in great detail in the Constituent Assembly. And Dr. Ambedkar was very clear that no power should be given to panchayats and the others because these are the exploiting elements. And his view prevailed in the Constituent Assembly. So Panchayati Raj and municipalities were not a part of the fundamental rights. So it was a part of the directive principles of state policy. Now, governments have tried to, raise the issue of Panchayati Raj and empowering municipalities, and they have failed. This was tried by Ashok Mehta, Balwant Rao Mehta in Gujarat, and Chimanbhai Patel finished it. Yashwantrao Chavan started it, and Vasantdada Patel and Sharad Pawar finished it. In Karnataka, Ramakrishna Hegde and Nazir Saab started it, Bangarappa finished it. And in Madhya Pradesh, Mr. Digvijay Singh Mark I started, Mr. Digvijay Singh Mark II finished it. So what happens is, if I'm an MLA, the chief minister depends on me. So I have power and I have patronage without responsibility. If I want to make money, I make it through the transfer industry. I strike a deal with corrupt officials, and for a share, I protect them from transfers. And I'm enjoying myself, and I'm quite powerful. I will never allow a Zilla Parishad to come up. And none of us will, we MLAs. So therefore, no chief minister has the guts to create a Zilla Parishad. And the 73rd and 74th amendments have been thrown in the dustbin and are not likely to emerge from that. So municipal governments don't really have any powers, Vaishali. They are weakened, they are instruments of state. Very often they're used for, financial investment, stuff like that. So I'm not at all optimistic about local government. The exception is Kerala, because that's a people's movement. It was created. And we may have stirrings of this. I believe we could have it in Andhra, but these are early days. So I would say that sustainability at the municipal level is not really an issue now, even though the BMC is fairly well run.
Right, sir, because in light of how municipalities highlighted in front of the cases, the judiciary aspect, since we have since you have mentioned 74th Amendment, they've casted a primary responsibility, and they are solely responsible to pay the environmental compensation as well.
Right, I know. But then you see, because they are not empowered.
Right, sir.
None of even the BMC is used as a source of patronage.
Right, sir.
And as far as MCD is concerned, you see, the battle is on now. But then you talk about the fight between Arvind Kejriwal versus the center. Right. I believe that it was a big mistake to create Delhi State and a Delhi Assembly. Nowhere else in the world do you have an elected legislature and a chief minister in a national capital. I'm just asking for trouble. London's mayor and Paris's mayor may have been historical entities. They have their powers. But no capital in the world has a powerful local government. In Washington, D.C., 2 mayors have been led away in handcuffs. So that is their status as such. So what happens is that creating a Delhi, and the fault is that of the Congress and the BJP both, because they were playing a game of populism and they created one and the other, and now they've got Mr. Arvind Kejriwal to deal with.
Right, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll take the last question for the session. Sure. Shweta, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, sir, there are norms, there are values and beliefs in a society that can shape attitudes. So, my question would be, these attitudes, values can impact empowerment, especially for women, for transgender persons, for So my question is, what historically, what could be such social factors that has rendered such a low empowerment for women, for LGBTQI plus community as well?
You see, society changes. If you look at all the social reforms, the legislation is a first step, an important step. Let us say that we abolished sati in 1832 with Lord William Bentinck and Raja Ram Mohan Roy's initiative. But sati continues. I mean, it continues in a few cases now, but it takes time. You take untouchability, abolished, it's still practiced. What happens is there's this huge gap. As far as the LGBTQ now movement is concerned, that the laws in ancient history we know from the carvings, whether in Khajuraho or in Konark, any other place, that there were certainly, same-sex activities carrying on. But our own conservativeness, also combined with the Victorian conservativeness, led to homosexuality being criminalized. And Britain gave it up much later. We gave it up now. So the social legislation has taken place. But even religious practices like, say, or caste-driven practices that the Khap Panchayats practice, you should not marry within your gotra. And if you do, your parents will murder you, is still happening today. So what happens is that these things will take time. There will be these crimes that we see every day. And then, and these will be a little more aggravated in the Hindi heartland, because the Hindi heartland remains the area of darkness. In any country, the regions close to the sea or to international borders tend to be more liberal than the core areas. And India is no exception. So what happens is that social change will take place gradually, and it'll start starting with Kerala. It'll take time. But we see now that same-sex relationships have been decriminalized. People are coming to the police for protection. We have the tradition of the hijras, as it were, which is its own subculture. And now they are increasingly given more respect and understanding, but it'll take time. It'll take, definitely depending on the levels of education, awareness, globalization. It's not easy, but I'd say it'll happen in your lifetime, not in mine.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. One last, not question, but advice or recommendation. What do you suggest for our fellows as young people to pursue in their public policy career? What things they should take care about?
Policy career is, and I'm being honest with you, is not really a first choice career. A lot of them, because public administration per se is not a discipline. It's a conglomerate of disciplines, whether it's economics, law, sociology, social anthropology, information technology, management, in fact, a variety of things. It lacks the focus and it's becoming Cinderella among disciplines. So to that extent, it's not really a full-time profession, because academia today is more focused towards, number one, the sciences primarily, and then to social sciences, psychology, now social anthropology is coming up. So it's one of many disciplines at all. It's not a gateway for a government job, not necessarily, far from it. So I would say that it gives you a good exposure to governance, issues of governance. It is being revived in the US. Now you have a strong civics movement in the United States. And earlier, if anyone joined the Sarkar as a bureaucrat, that meant he was a nikamma, because there's no career for civil servants. The top positions are manned by the politics of this, through the spoil system. So what happens is that it's not really a reference group, I would say, at this point of time. The public administration.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So, Shweta, yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So on behalf of IMPRI, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude, sir, for such an insightful, special, distinguished lecture on the topic public policy drivers. Your expertise and valuable insights have provided each one of us here with a deeper understanding of the factors and influence of the formulation of effective public policies in India and in the world. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Professor Patel. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, Director. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day. Thank you. So we can move on to interactive session, Shweta.
Yes. Moving forward, I would request Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam to commence the interactive discussion for today. Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam is a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher, gender and human rights. Ma'am, over to you.
Shweta, I think Professor Patel has to give the remark, the chairperson remark. I think that we have somehow skipped with such a interactive session. So maybe Professor Vibhuti Patel should give her remarks about the session. So I'll wait.
Yes, ma'am. My apologies for that. I would request Professor Vibhuti ma'am to share her remarks on the session, on the special distinguished lecture.
Yeah, I think the lecture was interactive session with very, very renowned and veteran administrator, IS officer, was extremely rich because it had a sense of history. It gave the idea of the geopolitical unfolding, comparative analysis of India, China, Japan, and European countries, the industrial, also the different contours of India's economic development immediately after the independence, implications of the new economic policies, the major challenges that the current regime is facing, and also some of the extremely volatile debates which are currently happening about freebies versus subsidies. So what do we call, what person like us call it as a social protection, social security, which is a right-based perspective. So right-based perspective versus the economic growth model, where he touched upon it. He also drew line between what is freebie and what is actual state demand, the merit good, and the state has to invest in it. So that is very important. Social sector budget, about which also he gave the example of Kerala, that why in Kerala, panchayats have so many important role, both in because they are not starving for funds. They have not to ask for the state government. But at the same time, when it comes to Panchayati Raj institution, my personal observation is that over the last 20 years, role of Panchayati Raj institutions have become very important. We saw also in the pandemic that it was not MPs and MLAs who were managing the show. It was the corporators and the councillors and the local self-government, both in rural and urban areas, who were managing the show during 2 years of pandemic. We also have now separate Ministry of Panchayati Raj institution, which is its own budget. So they don't have to go to the, say, planning department or the other concerned ministries for fund. So there my reading is different, because I see that wherever I go for a training of elected representatives in urban and local self-government bodies, I feel I get my tonic. I think so much is happening at the ground level. Maybe not much research is there, not much visibility is there, but a lot is happening. Even the urban Ministry of Urban Affairs is taking out a serious journal read by all the bureaucrats and this thing in the urban India, that is called Urban India. All of us are contributing, when Dr. Arjun Kumar and all are contributing, and we also get the feedback. The question of Baba Saheb's aversion to empowering rural self-government, local self-government bodies was also rooted in the caste-based segregation, what Gandhiji called Ramarajya. Gandhiji's dream of Ramarajya was rooted in the rural reality, while Baba Saheb says that no, there is no harmony in the rural area. You can't idealize rural areas, because these are the places which are most caste-ridden and the most brutal form of caste exploitation and caste-based atrocities are happening at a relation of production level. Many of you must have read Premchandraji's short stories and novels, where such a powerful depiction of what happens to a Dalit person that comes out. Another thing is that about civil service. Okay, civil service, I think Sir said that not much interest is there. But I think the issue, the interest on social policy has increased. So whenever, so many universities which never had special certificate courses or diplomas or even degree programs, to happen. They had to go either to Sussex or Oxford or London School of Economics to learn the social planning policy which government of India was encouraging. Now you have these courses available in India. Whether you choose to be choose the career of becoming bureaucrat or administrator or appear for MPSC, UPSC exam, and there also I think the upper class elite people who were going for these services. Now you have an aspiring class, the first generation learners, second generation learners who are now appearing for this exam and seeing that seeing their future in the state job. And that's why you also see so many state governments are facing tremendous challenge at the time of such examination. The local people, the people who call themselves the sons and daughters of the soil, from other states. And we have seen in Bombay has seen a really ugly scenario where every time there is an entrance exam, you see the conflict situation. So I think things are very, very complex, and I really comment the way our resource person for today has really taken up the issue and such a challenging way in which he has really, Bhartendra ji has taken up this challenge of connecting the dots of the different changing contours of India's politics, Indian economy, Indian diplomacy, Indian relation, the role of a heat, and the powerful terminologies he has used about the new Quit India movement, about the NRIs people, highly qualified people leaving the country. I think it made the session extremely lively and useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Would you like to add anything, Professor Patel, on Indians leaving India? Because all your relatives are outside India.
Yeah, I am the only one in India, and they started doing it way back in the 60s. But Patidars of Gujarat have started leaving India way back in the 60s because their relatives who were earlier in Africa, they moved to UK or USA and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. So they were also facilitating their out-migration, no? So that has happened. And but the only thing that I see that the diaspora, I don't have much respect for the diaspora community because they are completely insensitive to the Dalits, Adivasis, religious minorities, because sitting there outside India, they project themselves to be more Indian than Indian themselves, and they are still in the mindset, like all my people who left India in the 19th century, they're still in that kind of mindset of casteism, communalism, extremely conservative, inward-looking mentality, extremely cruel towards those who have a choice-based marriage and who believe in the racial purity. I don't subscribe to all these values. Yeah, I don't subscribe.
When I visited United States, there I happened to be in Harvard. So there I saw a lot of professors working on these areas, that how those who are coming in the US from India, how they are going for with this caste and other things, the old mentalities, and rightly put that way. So yes, there's things to learn from everywhere. So now we start with the interactive session. Shweta, would you like to do the announcement for the form? Yeah, then we can go to Shalu.
Yeah. Yes. So before we start today's interactive session, there's a small announcement. So we hope you are learning well from the program, dear LPPYF fellows. Thank you for your esteemed participation in LPPYF Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship. We are in the process of updating the fellows profile LPPYF 2023 summer on our website and require some information from your end. So kindly fill in the required details. There's name, designation, organization, city, date, and a bio note of a maximum of 75 words, along with your high quality headshot, that is face picture, to be uploaded on our website page. Fellows profile LPPYF 2023 Summers Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship IMPRI. Therefore, we humbly request you to fill out the Google form. It has been shared in your emails. Kindly fill out the form by June 26, 2023 at your earliest convenience. Thank you so much. Now we can start our interactive discussion session by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam.
Yeah, sure. So, so we are on, this is the end of week 2. So we have gone through all these sessions. Now, of course, we have, a lot of interaction during this last session, but any questions, comments, or discussions you would like to have, we can have it right now. Or I can start with something else. So because time is less, because Vibhuti ma'am has to go somewhere. So we can just take question, comments, and discussions, and we can end. Or otherwise, I can take some short topic and I can continue.
We have already exceeded the time limit. It is 1:15. Yeah, it's 1:15. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, any questions, comments, discussions from the fellows? So if it is not there, then I can quickly, take this issue of, the torture, the custody, the custodial, tortures. And on 26th of June, Amnesty International will be celebrating, the day of, ending torture. And this is the web page of Amnesty International, which is talking about, stopping custodial torture, because last time we had this discussion that, that how to, ensure that people in the police custody are not being tortured. So you can look at this website. And there is a UN Convention on Torture, which India has not ratified. We have to ratify it. And globally, there is a survey by Amnesty in 2014, which covers 21,000 people in 21 countries. And they reveal that there is a fear of custodial torture, which span all the continents. According to Amnesty International, half of the respondents were afraid of the prospect of torture if taken into custody, while more than 80% of them wanted stronger law for protection against torture. However, more than a third of respondents believe that torture will be justified. So basically, the report says that the rules against torture are weakest in India, Argentina, Mexico, Nigeria, and Peru. And and we have seen during the corona, this George Floyd thing which happened in US, and even in India during that point of time, we have 2 people. This case was highlighted during the pandemic, that the son, Mr. Jairaj, and his son, Mr. Phoenix, were grossly tortured, and they died, and it was it was really kind of a shocking kind of an incident. And the Victorian era law, which is Indian Police Act of 1861, which governs the police till now, and we have not amended the law, and this legislation is silent on disciplining the police in administration of its duties. And the Supreme Court in D.K. Basu versus State of Bengal, it has given a comprehensive guidelines on how to prevent custodial deaths. and it is one of the worst crime. It says that the judgment says that custodial death is perhaps one of the worst crime in a civilized society governed by the rule of law. And recently we have this case in Uttar Pradesh, Kasganj, where a 22-year-old man was, detained for questioning after a minor Hindu girl went missing, and the police claimed that he has hanged himself from a pipe in the prison, and but his family claimed that he was murdered. And if you see the data of the custodial deaths, about 1,888 custodial deaths in India, they took place over the last 20 years, but only 26 policemen were convicted. And this is the data from NCRB, National Crime Record Bureau. We have different laws. We have spoken about the Article 20 of the Constitution of India, which protect the citizens from self-incrimination. We have the provisions in the Indian Evidence Act, the Code of Criminal Procedure, the Indian Penal Code, and these have been revised also according to the Supreme Court judgment. But still, we are having this data, that custodial deaths are increasing in number. And in 2020 itself, 76 custodial deaths were reported, and highest number was reported in Gujarat, and there is no conviction which took place till now. So the NCRB data show that 96 police persons have been arrested in custodial death case in last 4 years, but again, convictions are very less. So another study which says that this is Parliament. In the Parliament, the Minister of State of Home, he said that a total of 2,544 cases of custodial deaths which took place in India during 21 to 23, and in 1940 took place in 2020 to 21. So most of the cases are registered in Uttar Pradesh. This is what the data say. So the National Capital of Delhi also show that 45 and 65 deaths took place between 2020 to 2022. So in Jammu Kashmir, we have seen a lot of encounter deaths. In Chhattisgarh also, a lot of encounter deaths were reported. So we can go through this data. This is one of my famous, one of my favorite kind of, this thing that how people have responded to violence by state in such situations. Now this is a famous case which took place in Manipur, where Manoharma died on 15th July 2004, and this is during the police encounter. She was shot several times, her bullet-ridden and badly mutilated dead body was found abandoned 3 kilometers away from her home, where she was arrested at the night before. And 5 days after the killing, around 30 women walked naked triumphal to Assam Rifle headquarters, shouting, "Indian Army rapists to we all are Manoharma mothers." So, the way the people have responded to the situation of violence by state, and similar case of violence have been reported, where the Armed Force Special Powers Act was, and other draconian laws have been misused against, common citizens, and people have been protesting. Iram Sharmila, she sat on fast for several years. Then Soni Suri and other women, they are, protesting against this form of violence and imposition of such laws. In another incidence, when we say that, as during the last session, that, something which is not happening on the ground, no, on the ground, a lot of things are happening. And this is, again, another case where 200 women, they lynched Akku Yadav, who was, it was said that he was a rapist, extortionist, and he is being accused of several murders. And following a decade of criminal activities and rape allegation, a bail hearing was scheduled for Yadav in Nagpur district. And this spread around their neighborhood, and hundreds of women marched from the slum to the court carrying vegetable knives and chili powders. And when Akku Yadav appeared, he saw a woman who has raped, and he shouted that he would rape her again. And then the woman started hitting him with her sandal, and then the other woman came in, and Yadav was stabbed around over 70 times within the the premises of the Nagpur District Court in the courtroom number 4. On the floor of the courtroom, he was stabbed, and chili powders and stones were thrown on his face, and the kind of lynching occurred. And the woman claimed that he has been raping and abusing local women with impunity for over a decade, and the local police has refused to help his victims or to pursue charges because the other was bribing the police. So these are the kind of incidents of resistance which took place. But if you see the status of policing in India report, which came in 2019, it says that 2 out of 5 police personnel served in Bihar, and 1 out of 5 in 6 other states, they have never received any kind of proper training. And without adequate training, most police personnel do not understand the fine line between maintaining public order and exercising authority towards under trial and convicted criminals. So again, the police in India works at 77% of its sanctioned strength. A lot of positions remain unfilled, and vacancies in senior ranks are higher than vacancies in constable rank. And despite of this, only 2 states, West Bengal and Bihar, have some ratio which is recommended by one of the committee, and but in other states, this recommendations are not being followed. So over the last 5 years, on an average, only 6.4% of police force have been provided some training, and senior police officers are likely to receive much more training than at the lower level. So you can go through this report. This is available on the net. We have this International Convention Against Torture, and India is again positioned behind 161 nations, including Pakistan, and we have to ratify this Convention on Torture. And we are placed along with other 9 countries such as Sudan, Bahamas, other countries. So Supreme Court has asked the government to form a legislation on torture, and India is placed at the rank of 161 nations. So but when you see the practices around the world, now the police fraternity everywhere is known to be corrupt, but if you see the cases of Norway, Germany, and Spain, they have better police administration, they have political commitment, they are spending more money on training, and police in Finland and Norway, they are required, the officers are required to seek permission before shooting anyone, and even in Europe, where the law says that no weapons should be used, and a lot of restrictions are being placed on the European police. In Germany, police recruits, they have to undergo 2.5 to 4 years of basic training programs to become an officer, and there are master and bachelor's courses in policing. And in Hong Kong, there are a lot of structural reform which is taking place to place checks and balances to ensure that disciplinary measures are taken on officer guilty of offenses. So with this, I'll just end here. In a very short time, the kind of things which are happening in the terms of custodial torture and custodial rapes, and a lot of things are happening. But the thing is that we are not investing a lot of resources in terms of conducting research as to what is happening in prisons. We have filed several public interest litigations over the period, but then again, it has to be a continuous process. We can't just stop after getting a judgment, or because a lot of the time we have seen that the judgments which are being delivered by the court, by the Supreme Court or high courts, they are not being enforced properly on the ground. So continuously we have to put in more resources, more efforts to ensure that these whatever decisions are being enforced. So especially if we talk in terms of women, women prisoners, the kind of problems they are facing. So there's a lot of things that we need to do. So, but I will stop right now, and maybe we can take more questions if they're there.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening our gathering. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience. Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
In light of corrupt police fraternity, as you have suggested in your presentation, ma'am, do you think in hindsight, should there be a separate organization, a governmental organization perhaps, to hold police authorities accountable for their, probably misconduct or even human rights violations at times?
Yeah, we have this National Human Rights Commission at the national level. We have state human rights commissions, but again, and they have also issued guidelines time to time to ensure that these kind of things shouldn't take place, and that the police shouldn't violate the rights of the at least the accused. They're not being tortured, they are not being handcuffed, but still the things are going on. And that is why the role of civil society becomes important in that kind of situation, because all these institutions, they have issued guidelines, but then who is following and how much it is being followed, that we have to continuously monitor. Because even if they are being, the guidelines are being issued, sometimes they are not being enforced, sometimes police are not being sensitized, they're not being trained to really, they're not being given training that, okay, DK Basu judgment is this. So, those kind of things are happening, and still at the ground level situation, that is why the role of civil society becomes important to really, see, to ensure that these guidelines are being, followed.
Yeah. I don't think there are any questions left from the audience.
Maybe we can have more discussion later on in coming sessions.
Yes.
We can go for the closing remarks, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. So now I would request Professor Vibhuti, ma'am, our chair, to give her closing remarks for the session.
Dr. Shalu Nigam's presentation on torture, custodial death, gross violation of civilian rights, I think is very important. But when it comes to comparative analysis, like whenever we went out during the 80s and 90s, we Indians would be speaking a lot about what all is wrong in our society. And but others know from other countries, in whether they're in Asia, Africa, Latin America, they would just, none of them would speak. And we realized the role of parliamentary democracy. That was the time where parliamentary democracy was only in India and Japan. And rest of the countries, they had either dictatorship or autocrat working. And they said that when you go back to your country, at the airport, there won't be arrest warrant for you and you won't be behind the bar. So I think one thing very important which emerges, and the learning from Dr. Shalu Nigam's presentation, is that violation is taking place. Indian society is extremely complex. We have a caste-based, religion-based, language-based, geography-based divisions in the society. So state perpetrating violence, that is one aspect. And the non-state actors also perpetrating. In case of honor crimes, we have to turn to state, because otherwise your own family members will kill you. In case of dowry, or in case of, so this whole dilemma that what should be the relationship with the state, it is a very, very complex, because at one level in the social movement, we know how the agents of state are behaving in an extremely brutal way with the civilians. But at the same time, when it comes to casteism, communalism, question of sexual violence, or dowry harassment or dowry murders, we also turn to the same criminal justice system. So I think most important thing is to have a dialogue, continuous dialogue, continuous sensitization on people's issues, and also what is happening at the ground level, making the bureaucrats, politicians, and the implementers aware of what is happening at a ground level. I can give you an example of the response to special economic zones in West Bengal, when in Singur and when the Tatas wanted nano cab, the farmers in the area whose land was going to be taken away, they were up in arm against the state, and the state used brutal force. In fact, local people are saying that. In fact, Jamila B can tell you she was there for 2 months supporting the community. And they said that there was so much of killing that the water bodies had become red with the human blood, So that was the guy. The same thing when it came to, when Reliance wanted SEZ in Maharashtra,
And in Sindhu, and 200 villages were going to be taken over. Panchayats did not know about it. When the study was done, in fact, and the study was done, ex-ante study was done, and the reports of the studies were revealed. A lot of media coverage happened that in what way is this SEZ going to benefit the villagers. People, National Alliance of People's Movement, they demanded public debate. They said, we don't want closed-door debate with the leaders. Let Reliance executives have this meeting in an open ground. Just you can have CCTV cameras and the screen all around. When they have any political rally, they have all these things, no? And the farmers will discuss with the Reliance that in what way is this special economic zone going to benefit us. Let us do the social cost benefit analysis. We don't want Bengal to be repeated in Maharashtra. We don't want a reverse of flood in this state. And the people from Sindhudurg, they said that here, this is the most fertile land of Maharashtra. We are taking 3 crops. We get enough water throughout the year. The best Alfonso, the mangoes are coming from there, and we are happy. The farmers here are happy. What will this SEZ give you? You prove that you are going to give you better quality of life than what we have now. And this public debate was covered by media. People were responding, citizens were responding, and I think that was a very important learning that we had, that without violation of democratic rights, without torturing and the leaders, without making the common people languish as a prisoner for years together, we can solve the problem. Democracy, and that's what I think Dr. Amartya Kumar Sen also said when the new economic policies came, when the stabilization policies were imposed in several African, Asian, Latin American countries, the use was forced. You can see all those movies on Netflix, how the Pinochet behaved, how different dictators in those countries behaved. And when in India, they say, we were told by World Bank that democracy is a luxury which poor country cannot afford. And that's what the rebuttal, which Amartya Kumar Sen says, that democracy has the best economic value. In India, even if 5 or 10 viewers die, it becomes a front page news because we have freedom of press. Even if there are people, some reported cases of starvation deaths in tribal area, we don't suppress the news. In China, 1 million Chinese people died during the drought. No coverage on newspaper was there. It was only the diplomats and the foreign journalists they leaked the news. So such a massive human misery takes place. And when this Chinese delegation came to Planning Commission of India, and I asked that, what do you have to say? Those economists so complacently said, but that represents only 0.1% of Indian population. So 10 lakh people perishing from the earth for lack of food, this elite economists were not bothered. And that too in the name of communism. Such thing cannot happen with us when there is a democracy. So democracy should be very much an analytical category in the economic discourse. You just can't have democracy versus economic development. Democracy and economic development, you have to talk. So I think Dr. Shalu Nigam, she has been the conscience keeper. She always brings in very important concerns of and challenges faced by our country, but we need to connect it and say to it that at least these issues are debated. They are not put behind under the carpet. I don't say this scenario is very good. We have to make presentation within the country. We have to make people aware about it. We should take it up in the global forum like UNHRC. And we should also, international NGOs like Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Against Torture, all these organizations, they are also working. We should strengthen and amplify their voice. I fully accept, but at the same time, we should also remember that we have to protect our constitution and we have to protect our multi-party system and parliamentary democracy. Then only these issues will be center stage. Thank you very much, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for an extremely important issue that you flagged up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With the chair permissions, we can go for a vote of thanks.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so as we
Go ahead, Shweta.
yes. As we come to the end of day 6 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online national summer school program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course, and internship program, I, Shweta Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our expert for the day 6 session, Shri Bhartendra Singh Baswan and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, for taking out their valuable time and giving us an opportunity to learn from this online certificate program. We thank our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, and lead advisor, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, for convening the session. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you coming Monday, that is 26th June at 11:30 a.m. for our 7th day of the certification course by distinguished experts, Dr. Punima Chauhan, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join into our future IMPRI #Web Policy Learning and #Web Policy Talk. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.